The night the library didn't close. My name is Robert Chen, and I'm 41 years old. I work as the evening shift supervisor at the Riverside Public Library in Portland, Oregon. And the night the power went out during a severe thunderstorm, and I discovered I was locked inside with someone who had been searching for me for 15 years. It was the night I realized that some debts from the past never truly disappear. Before I begin, if you ever work at a public institution alone during a storm, make sure you know where all the emergency exits are. Keep listening, because the person who was locked in that library with me that night wasn't there by accident, and what they wanted from me would test every principle I thought I lived by. I had been working at the Riverside Public Library for 8 years. The evening shift was my responsibility. I arrived at 3 in the afternoon when the day shift ended. I worked until 9 at night when we closed. My job was to oversee the circulation desk, help patrons find materials, shelve returned books, and make sure the building was secure before I left. It was a quiet job mostly. Libraries are peaceful places. People come to read and to research and to escape from the noise of the world outside. I enjoyed that atmosphere. I enjoyed being around books and ideas and the kind of people who valued knowledge. The library was a 2-story building made of brick and glass. It had large windows that looked out onto the street. It had a modern design, but it maintained the feel of a traditional library. There was a quiet reading section. There was a young adult section. There was a children's section with colorful decorations and toys. There was a computer lab. There was a meeting room. It was a community space that served everyone in the neighborhood. Thursday evening in September started normally. I came in at 3 o'clock. I took over from the day shift supervisor. There were maybe 30 people in the library scattered throughout. Some were reading. Some were on computers. Some were searching the shelves for specific books. I went to the circulation desk. I reviewed the day's transactions. I checked the return cart to see what books needed to be shelved. Everything was routine. By 4 o'clock, the crowd had started to thin out. People were leaving as the afternoon progressed toward evening. By 6 o'clock, there were maybe 10 people left in the library. By 7:30, there were only 4 or 5. By 8:30, there was only 1 person left besides my staff. It was a woman. She was sitting at one of the computer terminals. She seemed to be working on something, concentrating intensely, not moving much. I made my announcement at 8:45 that the library would be closing in 15 minutes. I said all patrons needed to make their final selections and prepare to leave. The woman at the computer didn't move. She didn't respond. She just kept working. I waited a few minutes, then went over to her. I said we were closing soon, and she needed to wrap up. She said okay. She said she just needed 5 more minutes. I said fine, but we really do close at 9. At 9 o'clock exactly, I locked the front entrance doors. I turned the sign around so it said, closed. I began my closing procedures. I checked each section of the library to make sure all patrons had left. I went upstairs. I went downstairs. I checked the bathrooms. I checked the meeting room. The only person still in the building was the woman at the computer. She was still sitting there, still working. I went back to her. I said, I'm sorry, but we're closed now. You need to leave. She looked up at me. She looked directly at me, and I saw something in her eyes that made my stomach tighten. She said, I'm not leaving. She said, I came here to find you, and I'm not leaving until we talk. I said, I don't know who you are, and you need to leave now, or I'm calling the police. She said, "My name is Jennifer Walsh." Does that mean anything to you? The name hit me like a physical force. Jennifer Walsh. I hadn't heard that name in 15 years. I hadn't thought about that name in years. And suddenly, all the memories came flooding back. The summer I was 26 years old. The girl who had gotten in my car. The girl whose name was Jennifer. The girl whose life I had destroyed. I didn't respond. I couldn't respond. I just stared at her. She was older now. She was a woman instead of a girl. But I could see the features of the girl I had known. The same eyes, the same face. Older, harder, but unmistakably the same person. She said, "I've been looking for you for a long time." She said it took me 10 years to figure out where you'd gone. She said, "I finally found you working here." She said, "I've been coming to this library for 3 weeks, waiting for the right moment. And tonight, when the weather forecast said there would be a severe thunderstorm, I knew this was it. I knew you'd be closing the library. I knew you'd be alone, or nearly alone. And I knew the storm would knock out the power, and the backup systems would fail, and no one would be able to get in or out. I said, "I don't want to talk to you." I said, "You need to leave right now." But even as I said it, I knew she wasn't going to leave. I knew something in the universe had aligned to force this confrontation. And the thunderstorm outside was going to make sure we couldn't escape each other. She said, "You ruined my life." She said, "What you did to me was the worst thing that's ever happened to me." She said, "I've spent 15 years dealing with the consequences. And now, you're going to listen to me. You're going to hear what you did to me." I picked up my phone to call the police. But at that exact moment, the lights went out. The entire library went dark. The storm had knocked out the power. The backup generator started with a hum, but after a few seconds, the backup power seemed to surge and then fail as well. Emergency lights came on automatically, but they were dim, and they only illuminated the hallways. The computer terminal where Jennifer had been working shut down. The lights in the library went out. We were in darkness. She was somewhere in the darkness. I was somewhere else in the darkness. And the storm was raging outside the building. The rain was hitting the windows with tremendous force. The wind was howling, the thunder was rolling, and the power was out. I navigated toward the circulation desk using the dim emergency lighting. I was trying to get to my phone. I was trying to call for help, but my phone had no signal. The storm must have knocked out the cell towers as well. I was completely cut off. I was locked inside a dark library with a woman who had traveled across the country to confront me about something I had done when I was a reckless young man. Something I had spent 15 years trying to forget. Jennifer appeared from the darkness. She was using her own phone's flashlight. The beam cut through the dark and illuminated her face from below. She looked angry. She looked determined. She looked like someone who had been carrying something heavy for a very long time and had finally found a place to put it down. She said, "There's no signal out there." She said, "I checked." She said, "The nearest patrol car is 15 minutes away if anyone even calls for help." She said, "We're alone here. Just you and me. Just me and the man who destroyed my life. And you're going to listen to what I have to say." I didn't want to listen. I didn't want to hear it. But I understood that I didn't have a choice. I understood that she had planned this carefully. I understood that this was the moment I had been avoiding for 15 years. The moment when someone from my past showed up to make me account for what I had done. She told me her story. She said that in the summer of 1998, She was 19 years old. She had just finished her first year of college. She was young and naive and excited about life. She said I had picked her up at a party. I had offered her a ride home. She said she trusted me. She said she got in my car, and she said that on the way home, I pulled into a secluded area. She said I told her I wanted to kiss her. She said when she said no, I didn't accept that answer. She said I forced myself on her. She said what happened in that car was the worst moment of her life. I listened. I couldn't deny it. I couldn't defend it. What she was describing was something I had done. Something I had convinced myself over the years was not as bad as it seemed. Something I had rationalized and minimized and told myself I had moved past. But listening to her describe it, I understood that I had never truly faced what I had done. I had just run away from it. She said after that night she couldn't function normally. She said she had flashbacks and nightmares and panic attacks. She said she failed her classes that fall because she couldn't concentrate. She said she had dropped out of college after her first year because she was too damaged to continue. She said she had spent years in therapy trying to heal from what happened in that car. She said she had struggled with relationships because she couldn't trust men. She said she had spent 15 years dealing with the trauma that lasted only 15 minutes in my car. I said I'm sorry. I said those words, but they felt inadequate. They felt empty. I said I was a different person now. I said I had changed. I said I had learned to be better. She said that didn't matter. She said what happened to her was real, and it didn't change because I had learned to be better. She said I had stolen something from her that night. I had stolen her sense of safety, her sense of trust, her sense of her own bodily autonomy. And no amount of personal growth on my part could give that back to her. We sat in that dark library as the storm raged outside. We sat there and she told me everything. She told me about the suicide attempt when she was 21. She told me about the medication she had to take. She told me about the relationships that had failed because she couldn't let anyone close. She told me about the years of feeling broken and damaged and unable to function in normal ways, and I listened. I didn't try to defend myself. I didn't try to minimize what I'd done. I didn't try to explain it away. I just listened. I heard her. I understood finally the full extent of what my 15-minute act of violence had cost her. The storm continued through the night. The power didn't come back on. The emergency lights remained dim. And Jennifer and I sat in that library, and she told me everything. By morning, the storm had passed. The power came back on. The sun was rising, and Jennifer said she was leaving. She said she had told me everything she needed to tell me. She said she felt lighter. She said confronting me, making me listen, making me understand, had given her closure that she needed. She walked toward the front door. I unlocked it for her. She stepped outside into the morning light. She didn't look back. She just walked away. I stayed in the library. I didn't open for the day. I called in sick. I sat at the circulation desk and I thought about what she had told me. I thought about the girl I had been, the man I thought I had become, the gap between those two versions of myself and the person I actually was. That afternoon, I did something I should have done 15 years earlier. I reported myself to the police. I told them about the assault. I gave them Jennifer's name. I gave them as many details as I could remember. The officers were shocked. They said it had been 15 years. They said she should be the one reporting this, not me. But I said she shouldn't have to. I said I should have reported it myself a long time ago. Jennifer was contacted. She was asked if she wanted to press charges. She said she did. The case went to court. Because of the time that had passed, and because there was no physical evidence, the charges were ultimately reduced, and I received a suspended sentence and probation. I was required to attend therapy. I was required to understand what I had done, but more than that, I was required to live with the knowledge that my actions 15 years earlier had rippled through another person's entire life. I was required to understand that what seemed like a moment of carelessness to me was a lifetime of pain for her. I still work at the library. I still see Jennifer sometimes. She comes in and she browses the shelves like a normal patron. We don't speak, but I see her. And I remember that night when the power went out and she forced me to face what I had done. I remember the sound of the storm outside. I remember the darkness inside. I remember the feeling of finally being held accountable. And here's what haunts me most about that night. Here's what keeps me thinking about it even now. There are probably many other women like Jennifer. Women who I hurt, or who my friends hurt, or who people in my community hurt. Women who have spent years dealing with trauma and pain that resulted from moments of violence or carelessness or entitlement. And most of them will never have the opportunity to confront the person who hurt them. Most of them will just carry that pain forever. Jennifer was brave enough to track me down. She was brave enough to lock herself in a library with someone she feared. She was brave enough to tell me her story, knowing that I might not believe her or acknowledge her pain. And because of her bravery, I finally understood what I had done. I finally accepted accountability. I finally became someone who could acknowledge harm instead of running from it. So if you're listening to this and you've hurt someone, please understand what that hurt means. Please understand that a moment of violence for you might be a lifetime of pain for them. Please understand that confronting what you've done is hard, but it's necessary. Please understand that someone you hurt might spend years trying to find the strength to tell you how deeply you've damaged them. And if you've been hurt, if you've been assaulted or betrayed or violated in any way, please know that you deserve healing. Please know that telling your story matters. Please know that holding someone accountable for what they've done is not only your right, it's part of your healing. The night the power went out in that library, the night the storm forced Jennifer and me to confront each other, that night changed everything. It changed how I understand myself. It changed how I understand accountability. It changed how I understand the impact of violence. And it changed how I understand my responsibility to be better, to do better, to be someone who acknowledges harm instead of running from it. The thunderstorm that night wasn't just weather. It was a catalyst. It was the thing that forced two people who needed to meet to finally meet. And what happened in that darkness and that rain was difficult and painful and necessary. It was the kind of truth-telling that our world desperately needs. It was the kind of accountability that allows healing to begin. So if you hear thunder tonight, if you hear the rain, if you find yourself in darkness with something you've been avoiding, I encourage you to face it. I encourage you to listen to the people you've hurt. I encourage you to become someone who understands that words and actions have consequences that extend far beyond the moment they happen. Because that's what happened to me in that library. That's what the storm taught me. That's what Jennifer, by her incredible courage and her relentless search for truth, gave me the opportunity to finally learn.